it's a real pleasure to have you today. I mean, thank you so much for this interview. People will have heard your impressive resume in my introduction, but I'd like to start with what got you interested in manual therapy. What was your career before MELT, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I started out, I was doing my master's at NYU in applied kinesiology and anatomy and physiology, and I got introduced to Jim and Phil Wharton, who did AI stretch, and it was the first time where I actually had to use real hands-on palpation skills to sort of sense and feel tension and, stretching somebody properly. And it was something different to put my hands on someone, and Jim kind of saw in me a bit of a good palpation talent. And he said, I think you're in the wrong industry, being in the fitness industry. I think, you should be doing manual therapy. And I said, I don't want to be a physical therapist. And he goes, no, not a physical therapist, more like neuromuscular therapy. Do you know who Leon Chaitow is? And I said, no. And he's like, I think you should look into that. And during my master's, I started to learn neuromuscular therapy, more hands-on technique, learning about the right amount of pressure, the right type of touch to induce changes, both in the nervous system and in the body to restore balance and function. And I think that really was a big pinnacle for me where I really shifted out of thinking that, if you ate right and exercised, that was enough to keep you healthy, active, and pain-free. And I had the opportunity for a lot of years to work on athletes who had gotten injured and to bring them back out on the field faster. And I think I really got very influenced by his work because it seemed like it could fix anything. And that was really my introduction into manual therapy.
Okay, wonderful. And, I read, I watched your videos, your introduction, and you said you went through pain before you actually discovered MELT. Can you explain a bit? Because from what I understand, it wasn't a pain it's not that you injured yourself. It was a chronic pain that gradually came, right?
That was right. It was, I had been an athlete for a lot of years. I was a competitive cyclist. I had, been lifting weights since I was 13, and I was pretty accustomed to pain, I had injured my knee, I sprained my ankle, I had all those kind of things. And this was a different type of pain. You're right. I was 27 years old, and one day I woke up and my foot hurt me. And I thought, is there something in my shoe? And kind of took off my shoe, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And it was just such a peculiar type of pain in my foot that I hadn't experienced before. And I kind of got better through the day, and so I sort of forgot about it. And then over the course of days and then weeks, it really got bad where I had thought, my gosh, I must have stepped on a piece of glass. And so I went to the doctor. I had him look with a magnifying glass, and no, nothing's there. And I was like, this is such a weird pain. And it just accelerated like a snowball effect. It just got worse and worse and worse. And what started out as what I could tell you today was plantar fasciitis, slowly started to create this distortion in my body. I wasn't sleeping right. I wasn't walking right. My mood changed. I was exhausted. And it really shifted my belief that, neuromuscular therapy could fix it, because I felt like I was the smartest kid on the planet at that point. I had a master's, I had all these, pedigrees and all this stuff, and nothing made a dent in this pain. And I ended up going to all these top New York City doctors, and I had MRIs, and then they were like, maybe it's MS, it's Parkinson's, what is it? Because the pain had at that point just riddled my body. It was up in my leg, it was in my back, and it just sent me into a state of fatigue. I just think it was exhausting. I was exhausting my nervous system. I was exhausting my mental state. And that was really, I think that really was a shift for me, because I had never experienced a pain that came out of nowhere that I didn't have. I couldn't point to something and say, that was what it was. And, today I can tell you that there was a lot in my life at that time that was going on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really what was a catalyst for the pain arising in the first place.
Of course, it's closely interlinked. I mean, it's the chicken and egg story, the mental and the emotional and the physical. But so I guess what was the discovery of MELT? How did you find that?
Well, because, my whole journey actually started as a kid. I had a great grandmother who was this spry, unbelievably brilliant, intuitive, guru to me. She was just like a ball of love. And she was the one person that when I was a kid, I always had this weird knack of feeling vibration on living things. And just as an example, one time I was in the backyard and I used to love lying on the grass because the roots of the trees had this dynamic vibration. And I used to say it was like getting filled up at the gas that would fill my energy back up. And one day I went out into the backyard and the vibration was gone. And I started hugging all of the trees in my backyard. My dad was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "The trees are dead." And he's like, "No, it's the fall. It's just that the leaves are gone. They'll grow back." And no, sure enough, the next spring came, no leaves grew back. And my dad used to just, "Don't say things like that. What you're doing is wrong. That's not normal. You're strange." And she went from being this brilliantly spry woman who said to me, "What you think is a curse is your greatest blessing," and was so full of love. And the next year I went back to see her, and she didn't know my name. She didn't know who I was. And it took me to a tailspin that at 10 years old, I was like, "What happened to great grandma?" And my aunt said, "She just got old." And I said, "Are you going to get old?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Am I going to get old?" And she said, "Yeah, it's happening right now." And I said, "Well, how do you stop this from happening?" And I think that at a young age, I grew up in the 70s. And so what epitomized health and wellness were people like Jack LaLanne and Jane Fonda and the 20-minute workout. So fitness became my thing that I thought was going to help me lead an active, healthy, pain-free life. And on I go to this journey of trying to figure out what it is that I feel under the skin. And so all of these years of doing neuromuscular therapy, and Leon used to say, "Well, vibrations happen, you've got your heart rate and your breath, and there's lots of frequencies and vibration in the body." And I said, "No, this is like right under the superficial tissue. It's like there's a fluid that moves." And he's like, "I don't know what you're feeling, but just keep asking people and you'll find your answer." And so I had gone down this road of trying to figure out what that vibration was. And when I got into pain, I went to see a cranial sacral therapist. Mm-hmm. And it was the first introduction to light touch therapy that I had ever had. And I'm not kidding. She worked on my nose. I had this somato-emotional release. And then the next day, my foot didn't hurt me. And I was like, "What muscle were you on?" And she said, "I wasn't on a muscle. I was on your cranial rhythm." And I was like, "You mean the cerebral spinal fluid flow?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Did you do something to it?" And she said, "I've caused regulation." And I was like, "So when you put your hands on people, do you feel vibration under the skin?" And she was like, "Wait, do you know what I'm talking about?" I said, "Oh yeah, like organs have motility and movement, and there's different levels of movement in the body." And she's like, "Sue, not everybody can do that. I think you're in the wrong industry once again. I think you should learn how to do light touch therapy." And so in the late 90s, I went out and I started to learn about cranial sacral therapy and visceral manipulation and lymph drainage. And nothing really told me about what that tissue was that I was feeling. And I got introduced to Gil Headley, who does a layer-by-layer dissection course. And that really, I think, was a huge shift in my perspective of what connective tissue was. And he defined it as a system. He's like, it is a three-dimensional architectural matrix. It has living cells in it. It is a fluid movement. Maybe that's what you're feeling. And that was it. I went back to NYU and I said, "I want my money back. How can, I have a master's in anatomy and physiology and not know anything about this three-dimensional system in my body?" And I got taken under the wing of Tom Findlay and Robert Schleip and Judy Walker and all these other people who were really looking at fascia in a different way. And it just really shifted my perspective, and I started to understand that connective tissue was actually a conduit to the nervous system. It was the environment that the nervous system relies upon to function efficiently. And so if connective tissue is not sliding and gliding, if the tissue loses its supportive quality, it is your nervous system that's impacted. And so what was the discovery of MELT was realizing that with a client, instead of working on their joint alignment or their muscle balance, that if you could get the equilibrium of their fascial tissue to be more stable, the nervous system quieted down. It seemed to boost the body's ability to repair properly. And I just thought, this is something I'm onto. And where the discovery of MELT really came out was I had a client who had chronic TMJ and migraines, and I would work on her. And for the first time in her life, she could go a couple of weeks without having a single migraine. And she was like, "You're a healer. Like, this is amazing." I said, "I'm not a healer, but something is in your environment that's causing you to always have to come back every couple of weeks." And she said these words to me. She said, "Well, if you could just invent a way for me to do to myself what you do with your magic hands, I'd stay out of your office entirely." And I thought, I don't even know if that's possible to do that light touch technique, but it sounded intriguing. And over the years, I developed this makeshift roller that was made out of PVC piping, bubble wrap, a yoga blanket, and then a yoga mat, and I duct taped it together so it had this soft compression to it, because there were no soft tools.
Yeah, true.
All hard rollers and stuff. And I gave it to her, and sure enough, she went from not having to come in every 2 weeks, but it went to 3 weeks, and then it was 4 weeks. And then I'd call her and I'd say, "How are you doing?" And she says, "I didn't want to jinx it. I feel so much better." And I was like, I think this is something. And then I just started to develop different techniques. And so I basically developed MELT backwards. I did the release techniques, and then I understood rehydrate and rebalance, and then the reconnect. And by 2004, I just knew I had something, and I coined the term MELT. And I had been in the fitness industry for years, and I thought, gee, I think I could probably teach people this in a group environment. And I started to teach these classes, and today I've got 2,000 instructors worldwide. I got a book translated into 10 languages, and we're in 28 countries, and it's just such a privilege. Every time I say it out loud, it really is a lot of dedicated work, but I just know that I can help a lot of people through chronic pain and through persistent pain that seems like medicine doesn't help.
Well, my personal experience with MELT, I didn't have particularly any pain, but what was striking to me, I discovered MELT in Singapore with Sunny, is the immediate feel. When you do the foot sequence, your legs just feel lighter. I mean, it's hard to put it in words, but it's an amazing difference that you get immediately. And so that's a testimony of no pain. It's not that I moved from no pain, but even if you don't have pain, you have this release.
Yes. Well, that's just it. Is pain in and of itself is, like I always say, even if you don't have pain, we have all experienced what I call a pre-pain signal, and that is that sense of, like, when you sit for long periods of time and you get up and you feel like you aged 80 years, or you wake up in the morning and your back is a little bit tight, or your feet feel a little achy on the floor. But the thing is, you get up, you move around, and those feelings go away. And so we just kind of start calling it normal. But I think, it's not normal, it's average. And what you're feeling is the cellular dehydration that creates itself. It's caused in connective tissue. If you think of connective tissue like a sponge, it's literally like from day to day, your sponge just kind of gets a little bit stiff. It dries out. And you don't just slap water on a sponge. You actually have to learn to stimulate the tissue, almost like a pumping action, to draw fluid back into those cells. And what I don't think a lot of people realize is that the sensory nerve endings found in your hands and feet are abundant. And so, in fact, you can actually alter your own alignment and your perception of where gravity is just by stimulating your hands and feet. And I agree with you, Anna. There's people say, MELT makes this instantaneous change. And I say, well, that's the bonus of it. And that's what gets people to come back to do it again and again, because it does make these incredible lasting changes, but it's instantaneous. And so people really gravitate toward that. But the cool thing I think about MELT is as you start to treat yourself and the assessments and then treat and then reassess, it really helps your nervous system find a new balanced place, because a lot of us are kind of always in a tip scale towards stress. Yes. We just in a lifetime full of it. So this kind of gives people the opportunity to allow their sympathetic system to kind of quiet down in the waking state and let that parasympathetic or that repair system kind of come up to being dominant even in a waking state, which is unique.
Definitely. Well, you know, when I hear you talking about assessment is awareness. It's basically realizing, you know, in the neck technique, for instance, once you assess, you realize that you're a bit stiffer on one side versus the other. Right. And that's something that you would not realize until you reach the level of pain, basically, very often. You know,
well, that's it. Like, why do we wait for pain to get out of pain? Like, that's what I always say. You know, people believe that they're proactive, but what they really are is they're reactive. They do things after they've got a problem. They don't really do preventative care because they just sort of assume if nothing feels wrong, I'm great. But the reality of it is these pre-pain signals of feeling stiff every day, actually, if you don't ever do anything about it, you do start to get symptoms that seem a little bit more noticeable, like, you know, one of your joints always bothers you, or your back always feels stiff, or your muscles kind of take longer after you work out. You seem to kind of need more days for the tissue to repair. And again, we don't even call that pain, Ann. We don't call it pain, right? We don't call it pain. We just kind of call it normal. It's like life does this to me. But that's it, is that we need to, as a society, realize that the stress and the impact of today's modern lifestyle is kind of beating our bodies out of balance. And we almost by habit are learning to manage these high stress states. But the thing is, if you never help your body go back into self-regulation, if you just assume it will on its own, it's a matter of time where those symptoms of feeling like one joint is stiff or your muscles are sore, all of a sudden you start getting symptoms that are like totally unrelated to connective tissue. Like all of a sudden you can't digest milk. In the middle of the day, you're exhausted. You feel like you got to take a nap around 2 o'clock. But then at night, you try to fall asleep. You can't. You get up in the middle of the night to go pee. And what you're realizing is your nervous system is having a hard time with self-regulation. And those are things that, again, we don't call pain, but they are the precursors to accelerating your aging process and bringing you down a road where your body can't repair as efficiently as it did when you were younger. And the thing that we need to remember is that as we age, I mean, I'm sorry, but aging sucks. I mean, I turned 48 and all of a sudden I need freaking glasses. I can't read my phone anymore. Why is that? You know, God goes ahead and gives us these common senses, and then by the time we're 80, we can't see, we can't hear, we can't smell anymore, we can't taste anything, our hands don't work. You know, I just think to myself, again, I go back to my great-grandma and I think, isn't there some way that we can harness our resilience and our youthful vitality and carry it into those older years? Because as much as medicine's allowing us to live longer, it's not better longer. We're just adding years to the end so that we have to pay for more health care, which is sick care in the United States. So I think we're up against a bit of a battle, and if we don't actually partake in self-regulation, I don't think if we really take it seriously and we just are worried about, you know, what does my face look like and do I look fat in these skinny jeans kind of a thing, and we don't really realize that there's more that we should be doing for our bodies to help it out, I think that aging will look grim. I think that we can age well and wonderfully. I do believe it.
I you know, the reason why I really love your approach, and it's because you're right. People forget what being proactive means. And melt is relatively easy. I mean, it's something that once you've done it, you can repeat very easily. It doesn't take long. I'd like you to describe the sequence and why it is so important to follow that sequence. Because melt is easy. It doesn't require. It's a low-tech technique, where you just need a ball of different size, different. Yeah, it's very, yeah, you can show everyone. So this is the most common used bowl when you start.
Right. You know, like we have different, you know, like there's different balls, like there's firmer ones and things like that. But my whole approach is how little can you do and actually affect the body? How little can we do? And you know, people have this belief that they really have to kind of, you know, go at it. We got to beat our bodies up. We got to will it to change. We got to crush our bodies. We got to, you know, power through life and, you know, buck it up. And I think to myself, you know, there's really a gentle approach. And, you know, listen, it's not that I'm against the heavy compression techniques. I actually think there's a very valid reason. And I like heavy compression massages and things are wonderful. But the whole point is like, connective tissue is a supportive infrastructure. And so if you learn to create these really gentle approaches of compression or pull, you can affect your whole fascial tissue. But just like you said, we need to draw awareness. Like with one of the assessments we do with the ball is just squeeze the ball in both hands. And is your grip feeling balanced? Or are you kind of feeling like one hand has a stronger grip or one forearm feels more tense? And people are like, oh yeah,
if you don't mind, I'd love to share that when I usually assess, I feel that I'm gripping from my hand only.
Exactly.
I don't feel, true, right? So I feel if I hold it long enough, I will feel some tension right here. And after I do melt, it's like my whole arm is actually holding. Yes. And so there's no tension anywhere.
Yes. And so that's it, is, you know, like what you're talking about, like, you know, just to even show you how simple, like this is gliding. Yeah. So this is a technique where you do this with the roller. We have these like really soft, squishy rollers and stuff. And you do these gentle compression techniques. So gliding is a preparatory technique. It's same what you're saying is it's a way to explore your tissue. It's a way to sense what you're feeling. It's a way to ease compression in without going too deep, too fast and overexciting those cells. And then the second technique is called the shear force. And shearing, when you shear, I mean, if you even grab your own flesh and you pull it up and down, what you're feeling is a shearing, right? Whereas gliding would be more like me rubbing my skin. Shearing is where you're actually dragging tissue, or if you compress and then you wiggle your fingers, that's called an indirect shear. That's how you improve those sliding surfaces, by stimulating that tissue and actually causing an effect of tension. And then rinsing is a global fluid exchange where you're just pushing the fluid in one direction, very similar to putting water in a tub. If you started spinning water in a tub and you took your hand out of the water's still moving in that direction. And that's called the piezoelectric force, or piezoelectricity. It's a force. It's a generated force that you're producing. And the cool thing about collagen is that that's what fascia is all about. Collagen is like it's like a neurochemical transportation highway. It's a signaling system. It reacts and responds to tension and compression. And so these gentle things that we do, either, you know, with the roller or with the balls, each sequence takes about 10 minutes. And the whole principle is assess your body, see if you can identify common imbalances. I can point them out to anybody. Treat your body and see if you get rid of the common imbalances. And what is really compelling to me is when you're in pain, your world gets very small because you can't change. True. And the whole thing is the body is this adaptable system. And when you lose your adaptability, it's not great. It doesn't feel great. So what MELT really allows is that shift in the mind to help the brain process information in different areas and to kind of, you're almost changing the mind about the state of the body. And that's really powerful to do. And, again, if you like heavy compression or you like using rollers, MELT doesn't even replace self-myofascial release. People see the roller and they think, oh, MELT is self-myofascial release. And I'm like, I don't even believe that fascia releases, by the way. I think your muscles relax when fascia is hydrated, but I think our concept of what's actually happening in the body is not real. I think that we have a lot of assumptions about what's happening in the body, but I don't think a lot of people understand cellular science or neurological science. And I think that's the other beauty of MELT, is that I've taken really complex ideas about the nervous system and cellular science, and I've brought it to a level where anybody can understand. Like even my mom, who sometimes thinks I'm a personal trainer, you know, she melts and she's like, gosh, it's amazing how much better you can feel. And I'm like, yeah, did you hear that there's this New York Times best-selling book? You should read it, you know. But no. So I think that's it, you know, is that we don't need to hurt ourselves to get out of pain. I think that's what people do when their neck hurts them. They just want somebody to rub into their neck. And I always think that's the victim of the body. You know, if somebody's crying out for your help, you don't walk up to them and punch them in the face. You try to figure out what the problem is. And that usually has to do with listening and taking information and assessing the situation. And that's just what you said before. Assessment is really the mother of change. You have to know what's wrong so that you can treat it and feel if it makes sense. We just don't do enough of that. And I think that's what gets people hung up, is that they're not really sure what they're doing, why they're doing something. And belief and science are different. And so you can have your belief and science can say, no, that's not real. You know, you can believe that the sky is orange, but it's blue. And you can tell me whatever you want, but it's blue. And, you know, I think
I think it brings also to the level of feeling. Because, you know, you were talking about deep tissue massage that are very popular for many, many reasons. But I know that personally, my body like is blocked. The more pressure you put on it, the less I release, and that's a feeling. You see what I mean? So yes. the thing is that we have the whatever beliefs we have, but when at the moment it doesn't feel good. And one thing that I absolutely love with MELT is that it's a no pain technique. You should never feel pain when you do it.
That's right. And you will, like, I mean, when you work on, let's say, your inner thigh, right? The inner thigh is part of the rooted core. It's part of the fielding of grounding that we have. It's part of our central vessel, is the inner part of our legs. And there's stuck stress living in that area. And so if you put the roller, you know, you're lying there and you're working on your inner thigh, you're going to find, like, old potatoes living in there from last year's Thanksgiving. Like, it might be sensitive, but my whole approach is, if you find the sensitive area, that's not your job now to press harder and dig out the potato. It's information, and your job now is to take that information in, slow down, meet those barriers, meet the edge of resistance. Don't try to push through the wall. Just meet it with its own, like, again, that's what Leon always taught me, was it's the right direction, the right pressure, the right consistency of things that's going to induce a change. And that's just it, is if you have to tense up or you're feeling nociception, you're feeling pain reception, you're kind of defeating the purpose. You're causing pain to get out of pain rather than taking the information in, slowing down, decreasing the pain tone, treating it, and then go back to the area that was sensitive. And actually, if you do it that way, you might find that the areas that were sensitive 5 minutes ago, you go back to reassess just in pressure, and you're like, wow, it already feels better. I say, there you go. And we barely did anything. And that's the thing that people say is like, we don't really do very much in MELT. I said, you have to do very much to actually induce a change in the body. You just have to know how to trick your brain into doing something different. So, you know, MELT, again, not self-myofascial release. MELT is using fascia as a vehicle to quiet the stress reflex and boost the body's natural repair. It's actually a way to get to the nervous system in a very subtle, very, I would say, very Jedi-like mindset. You're kind of sneaking in. It's a little stealth-like. And, you know, it's like having an old lady come up to you. She looks really sweet, but boy, she's got some, you know, some sass to her. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what melt is. It looks like a very subtle, gentle technique, and it is, but it's powerful when you feel your body go from a place of disarray and unknowing and not doing what you want it to do, and you feel that change. It really, I think, empowers people to realize that they can harness their resilience and they can harness how they feel and feel better. Need to, you know, hurt themselves to feel better. I just think we can love people better. We can love ourselves better, and I think we need more of that. We need more happiness and joy, and those are important pieces of an overall happy life.
Definitely. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you is that I think women in particular can really benefit from MELT, because we all usually juggle with so many things that we tend to ignore until we can't ignore. And yes. And the fact also that we're going through cycles, and I have a daughter, a 16-year-old daughter who's going through puberty. I'm 48 as well, so I'm heading to menopause. So we can, it gives a full perspective of what a woman's life is never linear. I mean, you cannot really see your life. You know, so many people, for instance, think, oh, well, I could do this 10 years ago and it was no problem. And now it seems I don't really feel like that. I think there's more to it than age. There's also phases. And what I love about MELT is that MELT can be a routine, something that you integrate in your life on a daily basis, and that will have long-term effects without you seeing it. Actually, it's and so Sue, I'd love to know, what kind of routine do you have?
Myself?
Yes.
Well, I get up in the morning, and it is funny. I do have a good routine. I wake up in the morning, and when I brush my teeth, I melt my feet. I just do the soft fall, and I melt my feet in the morning. You know, I oftentimes go for a run with my friend Jeff, which is kind of like soul therapy. We just run in the park and get out into the trees and the natural world, because I live in New York City, and it's like kind of the reprieve. I come back, I melt, and then I do a lot of writing. I run my own company. I am the CEO and the CFO, and I, you know, am tirelessly trying to share the MELT message. And, you know, and I eat very well. I always try to get to sleep at the same time. I don't take medications or anything like that. And I just kind of try to find good balance. I've got a wonderful husband who will pull me out of the office if I've been in here too long. You know, and I just feel like I instill an active, healthy, pain-free life, you know, and I really, my husband will say it, you know, like, she never sits on the couch. And at night, if we're going to watch, you know, a TV show, she's on the floor on the roller, and she's always just helping her body to recover from the day. And he's like, she really does practice what she preaches. And I think that that's it, is we can form good habits and bad habits. We can form compensatory patterns and cause problems for our bodies that we don't even know that we're doing. And I think that what MELT offers is that check-in. How am I doing today? I'm not going to worry about the past. I'm not going to worry about, you know, 10 years ago, I used to, I could, this and that. And with women, you know, to go back to your point about women, you know, for the 2,000 instructors we have, about 1,900 are women. And women tend to, first of all, we tend to be the ones who have more chronic pain. We commiserate about it, we talk about it, whereas men in our society, I think it's more of a culture. Men are more into grin and bear it, push through it. They have to be stoic. They don't talk about how much pain they're in. They just suffer quietly, and then they yell at somebody, and you think that they're mean, but really they just don't feel good inside. And so I think that the men that we have, most of them are very mindful already. They're either Pilates or yoga, or they're in that hands-on therapy. Very few are personal trainers. Like, those guys are just into go, 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 and smash my fascia and crush my fascia and blast fascia. And I just think, I don't even think they know what they're talking about. And, but I think that men go through cycles just like women do. I think that we don't see them. They're not defined, whereas women have menopause. Boys go through puberty too. And life changes, when I talk to my, male cohorts out there, they'll say, yeah, 10 years ago, I used to be able to run a marathon, and now my legs always ache me, my knees hurt. And I say, well, you can restore a lot of your body today. And they're like, and they'll say things like, I wish I could just go back. And I say, no, that's the trick, is stop telling your brain that you want to go back, because here's the thing, you can't.
Yes.
The past is the past. That's why we call it the past. It's in the past. You got to live very presently. Don't think too far about the future or what you need to accomplish. Just how do you feel today? How can you make today a happy, good, fulfilling day? Focus on that, and tomorrow's going to be great. If you worry too much about the future, if you linger too long in the history and the wishing of things to be different, it's hard to ever really have grounding and to have power and to have strength, really. And I mean that soul strength. I mean that real inner warrior. And I think that that's what MELT is it's a bit of an interruption in our belief that we have to constantly do and produce and be better, and we shame ourselves for not being as good as we could be. And I think it really gets people back into their body to tune into what's really right, and that their bodies have the capacity to change, and they can harness the resilience of their body and get it back on track. And I think, like you say, it's like, people melt once, they feel that change, and they're like, I think I'm going to do that again. I'm like, hey, right? But they make that conscious choice, and that's really the shift. And, 100% of the time, your brain is what's producing your sense of self, your sense of pain, your sense of emotions, past memories, future intentions. But we can shift the neurological pathways. You can change your brain through your body and through awareness. And sometimes I just don't even think people realize how much good is going on in their body. They focus too much on the wrong. And I say, well, let's point out the wrong, but let's show you how cool it is to put you back to right. And I think once you have that, you've got a real recipe for, again, a happier tomorrow.
I'm actually curious to know how you handle when somebody comes with an injury. So somebody hurt, because I've just twisted my ankle last week, and I'd like to share with you my experience, because MELT has transformed the way I heal. And so I'd like to know what kind of approach you have if somebody comes with a sore shoulder, or like one limb in pain and the other limb is fine.
I have been, because again, I'm 25 years into manual therapy now, and the practice that I think a lot of therapists take, and what I was founded on, and my belief system, is to do what we call the indirect before direct approach. So what I found is that, let's say somebody's got a shoulder issue. What I do is I take a big history and consent form. I want to know why, right? And they're like, oh, well, I did a CrossFit and I just pulled wrong, or I woke up with something. And I'm like, it's not a good enough answer. Like, let's watch you walk. Let's see if there's other layers. And the way that Gil always talks about it is peeling the layers from an onion away, and not going right to the core by just cutting through everything, but by taking each layer and really seeing if maybe what you have is a buildup of accumulated stress. I call that stuck stress, that is actually glommed up, and sort of the cup has runneth over. So if you kind of figure out if you could maybe take some of the compensatory pathways and some of the imbalances out of the body, take some of the strain away from the shoulder first, and then begin to treat the shoulder, you're going to not only make a faster change, it's going to last longer. And I was not there when I was in my early 20s. If somebody had an ankle problem, I'd be working on their ankle. But when I do assessments with people, oftentimes somebody who has a frequent ankle sprain or has rolled their ankle, something's happened up in their hip. Their hips are unstable.
Yes, of course.
Their brain couldn't figure out where the center of gravity was. The righting reflexes and the equilibrium reflexes didn't work properly, and boom, you roll your ankle. And that's kind of a big deal, because, a lot of times when people get injured, there's those two differences, right? You have acute trauma, like you get hit by a bus, and then there's chronic pain, like caused by a disease. But then in the middle, you've got this gray area we call sudden chronic pain, and it comes on with the same type of acute activation as getting hit by a bus, but it wasn't an acute trauma. Like, you did the same down dog you've done 50,000 times, only this time your hamstring blows. Or you bend over to pick up a pencil and your back goes out. Well, picking up a pencil is not an acute trauma. You just picked up a pencil. Why did your back go out? And that's what people don't realize, is that our bodies accumulate stress in the tissue, and our nervous system is designed to deal and endure and compensate until all you are is just this massive compensating machine, until your body just can't compensate one more little inch, and boom, you blow out your back, you sprain your ankle, your neck, you can't turn your head. And that's the thing that when I work with people, that I find a lot of people who think that they have an acute issue like a shoulder pain or a knee problem. Oh, it happened, I went for a run and wow, my knee really has been hurting ever since. Well, I say to them, was it the first time that you run in a long time? They're like, oh, no, I run 5 miles every day. And I'm like, oh, so it was just this run is what hurt your knee just on Tuesday? It wasn't the 18 other runs with not stretching and not caring for your body and just going right to work after your run and plopping down on a chair. You don't think that any of that has anything to do with your pain? And they're like, why are you talking to me like that? I'm like, because I need you to be realistic that your pain is accumulative. It's not sudden. And that's a mind blow for people. That really shifts their perspective, where it's saying, I need to take responsibility. Perhaps the reason I'm in pain is because I haven't cared for myself enough. And we need to exercise our right to be the most important person in our lives sometimes. And it's hard in this day and age because we have got kids and families and parents and whatever at work to take care of. But we're important. If your health is the most important thing, you don't have your health, again, your world gets
definitely
small.
And people don't actually stress in the same area, don't locate the stress in the same area. Some it's going to be in the digestive system, some it's going to be in the trapeze area, some other, and sometimes it's a bit of everywhere. And the assessment really helps identify, oh yes, of course I'm not balanced, I have this side heavier than that one, or this my shoulder is not in contact with the floor, that kind of feedback that gives the room for improvement.
That's
right. What struck me in the healing of my ankle is that I could do MELT. I missed stupidly a sidewalk. And my heel got caught into the sidewalk. So I think it was another stretch. I could do MELT. So since I could do MELT without having pain, I continued doing MELT every day.
Yes.
And interestingly, the next day I could walk absolutely normally.
Yeah.
The swelling is still there after 4 days, but I keep doing MELT.
Yeah.
And it's as if it was. So I also use essential oils to help the drainage and everything. But what's beautiful with MELT is really how you immediately feel something.
Yes, and I think that's it, is when you have pain and you take action, like, gosh, my ankle, boy, I really hurt it, that your first thought was, well, let me get on the ball. Let me see what I can do to help myself, rather than, I hurt my ankle, somebody get me ice. And then that's it. Like, the best you'll do is like complain about it and put your leg up. And I think, well, but there's so much you can do for a sprained ankle. And people are like, well, but it's a sprained ankle. I'm like, And, it blows their mind that there's actually something that they can do for themselves. And you're right. Like, I mean, when I sprained my ankle, I went a couple of years ago, I think like maybe 3-4 years ago, I went for a hike with a friend. And right at the end, I'm on that downhill and my ankle got kind of stuck in a twig and pow, I wrecked my ankle. And I've sprained my ankle, 20 times playing soccer when I was younger. But as soon as I did it, we got ice on it, and then I started melting. I went indirect before direct. I worked on my hip, then the back of my leg, then my calf. Then I did the foot treatment, and then I went back and I iced more. And so 4 days, I was back to walking around fine. I didn't have a limp. Whereas I think if I didn't do something like that, I would have a solid 2-3 weeks of limping and complaining and pain. And I just say life is too short to be in pain for more than a minute. Like, let's just get it out,
And not only that, because one thing that we did not mention is the mobility you gain with MELT as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because the range of movement, for a sprained ankle in particular, you can heal, but you will not notice it. Your range of movement has changed. Mm-hmm. Once you could actually move your foot for a full loop before, and you do something like that afterwards, because your ankle is not as lost its flexibility, and MELT has. Yeah.
Yes, that's actually a very big point, because the thing about fascia that people don't realize is it's a fine balance between stiffness and elasticity. Mm. So stiffness is fascia's ability to resist distortion when a stress is applied. So if ever you've, almost twisted your ankle and you kind of catch yourself, that's actually fascia bracing, signaling the nervous system. The nervous system sends down a quick reaction, and boom, you hopefully catch yourself. So there's a stiffness, and that's, again, fascia's ability to resist distortion when stress is applied. But on the other side of it, we have this elastic property, and that's fascia's ability to not just move and adapt. It's not flexibility. It's fascia's ability to move and adapt and then return to an ideal shape after the stress has been applied. And so what is really compelling about MELT is connective tissue. If you know how to treat it, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on. You could feel like you have a loss of flexibility in your muscles, or you could be on the other side. You could have a disorder like Ehlers-Danlos, Marfan syndrome, mixed connective tissue disorders, or something like that, hypermobility. And what's compelling is when you improve its balance between stiffness and elasticity, on either side of the spectrum, it brings you back to balance so that your muscles function more efficiently. Your nervous system reacts and responds with a different tone. And that, I think, is really a big aha for people, because with Ehlers-Danlos, if you've got hypermobility, you don't want more flexibility, right? You're hypermobile. What you want is the elastic property and the integrity of fascia to come back up online. And that's what MELT does, is it helps to restore the elastic property of fascia so that the stiffness and elastic properties are more balanced. It creates better integrity and that supportive quality of fascia. And when the environment that your nervous system lives in is functioning more efficiently, now you have muscles that move dynamically, joints that have good range, alignment that feels upright, and movement that feels good. I think that's really the compelling thing about it, is that we're not trying to make you more flexible with MELT. We're trying to make you more stable. And and when you're stable, you have great range of motion, you have great strength, you have power, and you have agility and resilience. And that, to me, is why people need to know more about what connective tissue is and how to treat it in a very gentle, passive way. Because, again, it doesn't take a lot to adapt fascia. You just have to know how to do it. And, I've been obsessed with this now forever.
So do you combine it to Pilates yourself, or you...
We actually have a MELT for Pilates program where, we see people, taking a mat class, and I'm like, oh, their bodies are not ready to do that 100 thing. That's not great for that body. But you melt your upper back, and we use the Pilates as an assessment, right? So we get them to do that C curve in the spine. Doesn't look great. Hydrate the upper back, go back into your C curve, and people are like, oh my God, I've moved 5 more inches. I was like, now go and do your Pilates. Mm-hmm. And Hallie Altman is my co-teacher of co-creator of Melt for Pilates. We also have a melted yoga program and things like that. Because the nice thing about Melt is, again, it doesn't replace anything. We can infuse it into anything to improve performance, function, and stability so that you get the most out of the things you like to do, whether it's running or swimming or knitting or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as your joints feel supple, you're going to move more.
So what if, of course, if you have an instructor, a MELT instructor in your area, you could go to your MELT instructor and they will guide you to where to start. But if you're in a location that doesn't have MELT, what would you recommend? How could people start with MELT to start experiencing it?
So we have now, this has been a long time in coming, on the Melt Method site, meltmethod.com, we have Melt on Demand. And I basically broke down the technique so that even if you didn't have an instructor, you could go to Melt on Demand and start in the beginner circle and learn how Melt works, what it is, and then those basic 10-minute treatment protocols, and you can practice them all. And then we have maps, and we have maps in the categories of pain, performance, and lifestyle. So, we've got Melt for neck, Melt for shoulders, we have Melt for basketball, we've got Melt for the desk sentence, and Melt for sleeping booty, like if you sit all the time. And then we also have classes and programs. I have my Melt Performance program, which is more geared toward athletes and improving shoulder and hip stability, which is oftentimes very hindered from athletics. And Melt for Pilates is there and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to get Melt on Demand, and then you can download the app and you can have Melt on your phone, on your computer. So I always say there's no reason that somebody cannot do this. It's simple, it's easy, it works. It takes 10 minutes at a minimum a day, 3 times a week. And the reality of it is Melt just feels good when you do it. So I would just tell anybody, if you're going to watch TV, get on the roller and do a little bit of self-care while you're watching TV. Just lie there, sense what you feel, work a little bit, and then reassess and see what you change. And again, I think that the body wants to be balanced. I think we're designed to go back into balance. I just think that sometimes the nervous system loses its way, and it kind of thinks that the tip scale of stress is the balance place. And so I think, again, Melt is an interruption in our busy lifestyles to go into our body, sense what we feel, and take responsibility for our bodies so that we live an active, healthy life longer. I think that's the important thing.
And that would be my last question. What would you say, because athletes in particular have this sense of invincibility until they get injured.
Yeah.
So what would you say to teenagers who are athletes and who usually, I know that my daughter is like that, she pushes herself like to the extreme, and only an injury will stop her, basically.
Okay, well, if I were a kid again, I wish I had met me when I was a kid, because I'd have probably been even a more elite athlete and less fearful of getting injured. But if I had to tell any young athlete why should they start melting today, I'd give them a twofold reason. 80% of athletes are injured every year doing practicing their sport, not in tournaments or games. They actually get injured while they're training. And my question that I would ask any young athlete is, what would you rather, a short career with a lot of injuries, or a long-lasting career where you can really harness the most vitality in your body and the best performance that you can, and then to learn as much as you can about that sport and pass it along to someone who is down that road that's younger than you? Would you want to mentor somebody and really instill something beyond yourself? That's what I would ask a teenager. Do you want a long career or a short one riddled with pain? Pick one. And if you want the short one, don't melt. Just don't care about your connective tissue. Just beat the heck out of your body. If what you want to do is athleticism, but you also want to engage in a regular lifestyle, you want to feel good even when you're not on the court, because even athletes have a life off the court.
Yes,
so
of course.
I think that, if what you want is to have the long career, you want to be able to play sports well into your 40s, 50s, and 60s. You gotta realize that the younger you are and the more you take care of your body as a teenager, the better it's going to be. Don't wait until you're old to think about aging. It's happening today. But you're not invincible. Life has accidents happen, and life has flaws to it. And, that's what makes life, the challenge is, I think, again, I just feel always so privileged and blessed that I feel like I've got a community of people who support me and love me. And I think, it's what keeps me going, is knowing that I've contributed and helped people. So as an athlete, had I known as a teenager what I know today, I'd have never sprained my ankle all those times. I would have never had knee pain like I did. I'd have been a better performer. And I was a good athlete, but I'd have been much better. I believe it. I think I could have done much more had I had the right support and the right self-care from the get-go. So I love working with teenagers. We work with the Harlem School of Dance. We work with a lot of the dancers because they just beat their bodies up.
Yeah.
And they know that they have to. That's the thing. If you commit to being an athlete of any sort, you know that there's risk. But you can minimize unnecessary pain and tension. And when your body is really working well, you have a significant less chance of getting injured. And when you do have impact, your body heals faster. And that's really the game of it, is to keep your body's repair system functioning as efficiently as it can. So when you need it, that's when it counts.
Yeah, and when you combine it with a good diet and a good habits, it's
that's
just
right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sue. It's been a pleasure. Extremely informative. Really fantastic. So I will, of course, in the outro, for everyone who listens, as usual, I write a post. So don't worry, you will have everything in the post.
Wonderful.
Thanks a lot, Sue. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.